Hello, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, we have the much requested case of Jennifer Pan. Y'all have been telling me to cover this case for quite a while, and since I did the week of Latin American cases, I couldn't just do it during these last 2 weeks. So today, I'm finally bringing it to you. It's a pretty well-known case, but I wanted to bring you the longer version with more details and everything I love to do. But anyway, I don't have anything else to add besides that, so up here you'll find my playlist with the rest of the cases on the channel, and down here are my social media links in case you want to follow me on any of them. So, with nothing more to say, let's get into the case. It's a little different from the cases I usually cover. Today, we're gonna start right off with the case itself, with what happened on November 8th, 2010. That morning was just like any other at the Pan household. Jennifer Pan, 25 years old, the person you see right now, had spent the whole day practicing and studying piano, an instrument she had played since she was a little girl. That day, she was at home after 9 p.m. She had the TV on and was talking on the phone while getting ready for bed. The people you see right now are Jennifer's parents, Bitch Ha, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, who is 53, and Han, her father, who is 57. They lived with their daughter in a house in Ontario, Canada. Jennifer's parents did what they would normally do. The mother went to visit her grandmother, then ran some errands, and ended up shopping in Markham, only returning home at 3 p.m. For his part, Han, Jennifer's father, went to work like any other day at the auto parts factory, where he was a tool operator. The only difference that day was that he got home later than usual. The reason for this was that, while he was on his way home, he remembered he had left a toolbox unlocked, so he simply decided to go back. When he finally got home, it was 4:30 p.m., so the first thing he did was call his brother, with whom he wanted to go shopping, and together they decided on a time to meet up. So after talking for a while, they decided to go to Home Depot together. Han finally got back home at 6:15 in the evening, with nothing else left to do outside. Han ate dinner alone and headed to his study on the second floor of the house, which was next to the bedroom where he slept with his wife. He spent quite a while reading news about his hometown on the computer, and finally decided to go to bed early, since he had to get up at 5 in the morning the next day. Meanwhile, at 6:30 in the evening, Jennifer invites a friend over to her house named Adrian Dinkovich to keep watching the series Gossip Girl and a bit of How I Met Your Mother. She lets him in, and they head down to the basement, which was an area with a couch and a big TV specifically for watching movies and shows. And when they're done, Adrian leaves around 9 p.m., while Jennifer decides to just go to her room to sleep. And here, at this point, is where the events began. Jennifer was in her room getting ready to sleep, to get some rest. She had the TV on upstairs because she was watching The Amazing Race. And around 9:15 page, she hears her mother come in through the front door, because she was just getting back from meeting up with some friends. Jennifer goes downstairs to greet her mother and sees her turn on the TV. So she just decides to go back to her room. When Jennifer gets back to her room, she decides to call Edward, a former coworker. So they talk for about 20 minutes or so, until Jennifer hears movement downstairs and some voices she doesn't recognize. At that moment, she hears her mother speaking in English and yelling at Han, which was unusual because in the family, let's say when they were at home, they would just speak their native language, which was Vietnamese and a bit of Cantonese. It wasn't normal for them to speak to each other in English. It didn't make sense. She realized at that moment that there were strangers in her house. Through all of this, she was still on the phone with her friend, so when she started hearing loud noises coming from the stairs, she decided to hang up. She knew that those heavy footsteps on the stairs couldn't be her father or her brother, who, on top of that, was at college, quite a distance away, so there was no way he could have been at home. At that moment, she sat on the bed waiting for her father to come closer to the house, to see what was going to happen. There was nothing she could do but wait for whatever happened behind the door. She heard two men shouting outside the room, and suddenly a scream from her father. Let me remind you that her father, up until all this, was simply sleeping in his room, with no idea what was going on until suddenly he woke up and saw a stranger on top of him. That's when he started screaming. Since he was asleep, and on top of that he didn't have his glasses on, so he couldn't make out the person's features. He really didn't know who it was and didn't recognize them. This man then, while yelling, asked him where the money was. By force, while continuing to question him, he dragged him downstairs where his wife was at that very moment, with another man on top of her. The couple then started shouting, asking who these people were. Neither of them had even been able to fully realize exactly what was occurring. They were still trying to process what these people had done to get into the house and what they were demanding from them. That's when Jennifer cracks the door open a bit and sees a man with dreadlocks. This man sees her too, and decides to go upstairs to grab her. He takes her downstairs, ties her hands behind her back along with her parents, and also asks her if she has money and where it is. Jennifer then takes this man to where she kept her savings for a new iPhone, which was about $2,000. She gives it to him, and then this person demands again that she show him if there was any other savings in the house. He takes her into her parents' bedroom and forces her to look for where the rest of the money was. She tells him that she doesn't know where the money is, she doesn't know where her parents keep it, so this man and another person come into the room and start searching the whole place. They turn the whole room upside down until they find some money in the mother's nightstand. So after this, they bring Jennifer back downstairs with their parents and start asking them where the money they usually kept was, where their savings were. It's worth mentioning that Jennifer's mother didn't know what was going on, since she really didn't understand much English. Her English was very limited, very basic, and she didn't understand why they were yelling at her or what they were asking her. Jennifer's father then said that he had $60 in the pants he'd worn that day, and Jennifer herself said she had seen her mother hide money somewhere in the room. So they took her back to her parents' room, and there they checked the pants and the place where her mother had hidden the money from a previous trip. It was about $1,100 plus the $60 her father had in his pants, so this wasn't enough. These strangers decided to take Jennifer's parents down to the basement. Both parents are forced to sit on the basement couch, their heads are covered, and finally they shoot Han twice. The first shot hits a bone below his right eye. It grazes the carotid artery, which is the main artery running down the neck. The second shot entered through his right shoulder and exited out the back. On the other hand, Jennifer's mother dies instantly from a gunshot to the head. According to Jennifer, at that moment she was still tied to the furniture, so all she could do was move her hands a little. The only thing she could really do was listen to the screams of the men who were downstairs in the basement. So when she heard the gunshots, she immediately also heard them say, "Thanks, we have to go now. We've been here too long." Her hands were tied in a knot behind her back, but she managed to grab her cell phone and call 911. This is the call. "What's your name?" "Someone just broke in. Someone broke in and I heard shots like pot. I don't know what's happening. I'm tied up upstairs." "I don't know." "I'm okay. My dad just went outside screaming. Do you think your mom is downstairs? I don't hear her anymore. I'm sorry. I don't know, Anthony." The only survivors of all this were Jennifer and Han Pan. But Han was in such bad shape that he ended up running out of the house to get help and collapsed in front of a neighbor, so they had to call an ambulance to get him out of there because he was completely unconscious. Not only was he unconscious, but when the ambulance arrived, he was lying in a pool of his own blood and was barely alive. The only thing he managed to say at that moment was that they had shot his wife, and that his daughter was still inside the house. So when the police arrived, they untied Jennifer and took her with her father in the ambulance. Han had to be put into a medically induced coma in order to survive. They didn't even know if he would make it through that first night. He was in such bad shape. So the only witness to all of this was Jennifer. But anyway, this would be the part of the story that Jennifer tells from her perspective, technically, and now comes the truth behind all of this, but it's going to take a little while because I have to explain a few things to you first. What I'm going to tell you now is more like the story of the family as Jennifer told it in her first statement to the police. Han and his wife Bitch Ha grew up in Vietnam and came to Canada separately, meaning they didn't know each other. The two of them arrived in 1979 as refugees and met in Toronto, where they also got married shortly after. In 1986, they had their first daughter, Jennifer, and 3 years later, her brother Felix. At first, they worked in a car parts factory in an area called Aurora, while living in a place that was an hour away, in a neighborhood that wasn't very safe. They really didn't want to keep living there, so for several years, they saved every penny they had, every little bit they earned from that job. They saved it so they could fulfill their dream, which was to move to a better neighborhood with their kids and give them the life they themselves never had. So in 2004, after saving for several years, they managed to move to a better neighborhood, to a bigger house with a double garage in a very quiet residential area. There was even a large Asian community in this place, along with many friends and family members. The two of them achieved their goal. They managed to have a house and 2 cars, a Mercedes-Benz and a Lexus, things they were quite proud of. By 2010, they had saved so much money that they could support their children through college. If that's what they wanted to do, they wanted to give their kids everything they themselves had never been able to have, and you could say that up to that point, they had achieved it perfectly. However, Jennifer says that her parents were no longer really together, they didn't love each other as much as before, and they even slept in separate rooms. When it came to their children's lives, they were really demanding. They wanted them to be excellent students, to get the best grades, to have the best opportunities. Without really thinking about what this could do to them, although clearly that's no excuse for what would happen later. According to Jennifer, she worked extremely hard throughout her childhood. She practiced piano every day, and had even won many awards for it. From this point on, everything she told the police was really a more optimistic version of what was actually happening. She mentioned that when she was a child, she practiced figure skating and trained nonstop. She would wake up in the morning and finish at night because she had to do her homework, and all of this was so she could try to make it to the Canadian Olympics. Until suddenly, she started doing very poorly in skating and decided to quit. Still, she said her parents comforted her, that they were there for her and supported her. By the end of elementary school, she hadn't reached the goals her parents had set, those goals they had imposed on both her and her brother. Both parents wanted good grades from their children, they wanted awards that would prove they had done well, and Jennifer hadn't achieved this goal. Even so, she kept saying that her parents supported her a lot, and so she decided to continue on her path through high school and into college. During high school, she focused on extracurricular activities, like her parents had told her to, things that would give her academic value so she could attend the best university in Toronto. But at the same time, they didn't allow her to go to parties, have sleepovers with friends, or have a boyfriend. She wasn't allowed to do anything that could take her away from her studies, nothing that could distract her from all of that. The only time she managed to get her parents to let her go somewhere was on the senior year trip at the end of high school, right when she was about to graduate. This would be a 2-week trip to Europe with all the friends she had in high school. During the trip, she became more than friends with a guy very close to her named Daniel Wong, whom she had met in the school band. They started hanging out more as friends than as a couple, but without her parents finding out what was going on. However, this guy Daniel started failing his classes and going down a different path. After finishing high school, he was charged with cannabis trafficking when 200 grams were found in his car. And it's true, he actually was involved in trafficking. Jennifer says she didn't like that stuff and that she actually didn't get involved in it, but she stayed with him anyway, even though her parents didn't allow it. And seriously, they didn't like it at all. When they found out about her relationship with Daniel, they told her she had to end it no matter what. But she didn't do it. As for college, Jennifer had been accepted to Ryerson University for early admission, which actually wasn't good news for her parents, since they wanted her to go to the University of Toronto. But they settled for knowing she would do 2 years at that university, and then later apply to study pharmacology at the University of Toronto. So they gave her permission to go to the university she wanted, and then transfer to the other one later. The thing is, while Jennifer was attending university, her parents gave her some money through a bank account so she could support herself. At the same time, every now and then, Jennifer would ask her parents for permission to stay at a friend's house who lived near the university so she wouldn't have to commute so much. Her parents said yes, very happy that their daughter was going to university and being responsible. Honestly, during all that time, everything about university and everything else was pretty calm until her parents realized she was still seeing Daniel. So they told her that she absolutely had to break up with him. So she simply did it because she thought, or at least that's what she told the police, that she was doing what her parents wanted and that it was the best thing for her. Finally, a year before the attack on the house, Jennifer had gotten a new job at a children's hospital and had graduated from university. So her parents were supposedly very happy. The problems with this story, with what I just told you and with what really happened, come up after Jennifer is interrogated and after her father wakes up a few days later. Let's just say that at first, no officer really doubted Jennifer or anything else that was going on, so the interrogations continued as usual, the way things are normally done. The first officer who took her statement asked her to do it again from another perspective in order to spot any discrepancies or any new details she might be able to provide. With all this, Jennifer managed to remember, put that in big quotation marks, the features of the people who had entered the house, their names, and roughly what their voices sounded like. She also authorized them to search her cell phone so they could see the call with Edward and everything she had done, the messages she had sent, and all those things that were important to determine what time the people had entered the house. After this, they let her go and told her not to watch the news because it could be bad for her. After the second statement, some officers started to find the whole situation a bit strange. She had already provided new information and had corrected some things that had happened to her, but things are still a bit complicated because it didn't seem like a simple robbery. First of all, they didn't take any electronics, even though there were some. There were laptops and there were also cell phones. And besides, money was found in Jennifer's mother's wallet and in Jennifer's wallet, so they wondered why the thieves wouldn't take those things, which were small and easy to find. But on the other hand, there were some detectives who thought it really was just an unfortunate case of people who went to rob a random house and the worst happened. So on November 11th, a few days later, they called Jennifer in for another interview. This would be the third time she told the story, and in fact, there were a few changes, another call to a different friend and more details about the assailants. But the strangest part of this interrogation was when they asked her how she managed to call 911. Her hands were tied, so it would have been pretty difficult to grab her phone and call emergency services. So they gave her a fake cell phone and asked her how she did it. This is the clip of how Jennifer called 911 with her hands tied behind her back. And how do you make the phone fall? 911? And do you talk down like that? Yes, I'm yelling at the phone like this. And how can you hear? Did you turn the volume all the way up? Yes. The detectives, determined to understand any missing part of the story, called Daniel Wong, Jennifer's ex-boyfriend, whom she had been in contact with over the past few days. He calmly answered every question they asked without any problem, and explained that his relationship with Jennifer had ended more than 2 years ago, and that, in fact, it had been Jennifer's parents who made the decision, but he respected it. He also started to say that he had been receiving strange messages and weird calls. People were calling his house, calling his mother, and never saying anything. Some of the messages were pretty strange and could maybe be seen as threats. And he was worried that all of this might be coming from the people who had gone after Jennifer and her family. He thought that maybe these calls were a warning that these people would come to his house and do something to his family. But there's a small detail I want to point out about Daniel and Jennifer's relationship before we go on. Jennifer's father had said the following: "End your relationship with Daniel Wong, or you'll have to wait until I'm dead." Very specific words, and also a bit controversial. And so, with Daniel's testimony and the testimony of some of Jennifer's former friends and high school classmates, it became possible to truly understand what her life had really been like. What I'm going to tell you now is what her life with her parents was really like, and what she had done over the last decade of her life. There was a time during her childhood when Jennifer wanted her parents to be proud of her. She wanted to get good grades, she wanted to be a good student. All of that fell apart once she finished elementary school with all those achievements she had promised her parents. From that moment on, that's when she decided to put her studies aside. She no longer wanted to study all day, she no longer wanted to have the best grades, and in fact, she started getting just enough grades to pass her classes. She couldn't even reach an 8, which would be a B here in Canada. Obviously, these grades weren't enough for the plans her parents had for her. So Jennifer decided that for the rest of high school, she would lie about her grades. She started forging every report card she had to turn in at home. She erased the grades with whiteout as best as she could. She wrote over them and reprinted them so they would look like a believable, normal report card. At the same time all this was happening, she had started cutting her arms, cutting her wrists, expressing what she really felt inside. Obviously, she hid this from her parents too. When she supposedly graduated from high school, her parents were very excited and truly believed everything she had shown them. They believed that their daughter Jennifer had the best grades possible. So for them, it wasn't hard at all to believe that she had gotten scholarships for college, as well as early admission to Ryerson. The only problem with all of this is that Jennifer hadn't even graduated from high school. She was missing one class to finish, and she hadn't taken it. And because of that, Ryerson University ended up withdrawing the early admission offer. The big problem I have with all of this is what she did next, because she kept pretending over the summer that she was getting ready for college instead of finishing the high school class she still needed. Let me tell you, it's very common here in Argentina to have to retake classes in your last year, and a lot of my friends actually did it. But, I have friends who finished high school a few months later. It wasn't that hard to finish the class, and my friends had to retake more classes than Jennifer did. She just had calculus. She only needed to do math, and she didn't do it. Instead, she just kept on. She pretended she was going to college, bought physics books, bought biology books, so she could keep up this whole act of studying science, pretending that she was going to study pharmacology later. The whole story could have been avoided by just passing that class and starting college the next year, or even just waiting another semester. The fake story she created was so elaborate that she couldn't get out of it. She pretended to have orientation week for college and even let her parents drive her to campus, even though she didn't actually do anything there. She would pack her things, go to the university library, and fill up a bunch of notes, a bunch of notebooks with things she supposedly did in class. Like I said before, with all the effort she put in, she could have just finished high school. She only had one class left. To me, it's ridiculous. She could have just applied to college the following year, but no, she decided to keep up the lies, even 2 years later, when she had to go to the University of Toronto because that's what she had told her parents. While she kept lying about college, she was also lying about her relationship with Daniel. She used to go see him and stay with him at York University, where he was studying. She also started working, giving piano lessons, and working at Boston Pizza, where, coincidentally, the manager was none other than Daniel, who knew what she was telling her parents and had also decided to help her. After 2 years of college, she decided to make a fake acceptance letter to the University of Toronto for pharmacology, just like she had promised her parents. She got to the point where she even lied to her friends, telling them that her father had hired a private investigator to follow her, so she couldn't stop lying. Once she was supposedly hired by the children's hospital to work there, she told her parents that she also had to work night shifts, and probably weekends too, and that therefore the easiest thing would be to stay at her friend's house, the one she had been staying with during college, since it was closer to her new job. So they were very happy and told her it was all fine, that she could stay longer at her friend's house. By this point, she was already an adult, over 21 years old, so she could have just moved out of the house without any problem. But she didn't. I keep thinking about all these things she didn't do that she could have done, or that could have made all the lies so much easier. But she didn't do it. What I'm getting at is, there was no need to lie to them since she was already an adult. She could have just moved out and done whatever she wanted, especially since she was also working, so it really wasn't that hard. And obviously, the lies didn't stop there. Besides working at the children's hospital, at some point she obviously had to graduate. So Daniel helped her find someone who could forge her entire university transcript. With perfect grades, of course. She also told her parents that they couldn't go to the graduation ceremony because there were too many people graduating, and that she had only gotten one ticket for one of them. To avoid them fighting over who would go, she said she had given the ticket to a friend, so they couldn't attend. A year after graduating, and a year after working at the children's hospital, it was already 2009, and Jennifer was 24 years old, so it was pretty strange that she was still living with her parents, and they thought what Jennifer was doing was odd. First of all, her father wondered why Jennifer didn't have any kind of uniform to wear to the hospital. And second, why didn't she have any kind of ID or badge with her name and the hospital on it? Because, let's be honest, that's something you need to be able to go to work. Why didn't she have any of that? So her parents decided to call the friend she was supposedly staying with for so many days. At this point, Jennifer was telling her parents that she stayed 3 days a week at this friend's house, which was closer to her job. They called this friend, who they supposedly knew from high school, and she told them she had no idea where Jennifer was or what she was doing, and that obviously they weren't living together. So they decided to check for themselves what was going on, and told her they would drive her to work as a gesture of appreciation. As good parents, they wanted to see where their daughter was working. Obviously, Jennifer couldn't refuse this. She couldn't just tell them no because they could go on their own, so she tells them yes, they can take her to work. And when they arrive, already at the limit of her lies, she goes straight into the hospital without any ID, without anything, and pretends to go directly to work. In other words, she goes in and hides inside. Jennifer hid in the hospital for hours to keep her parents from finding out. She stayed hidden until they left. However, it was clear she couldn't hide what she was doing anymore. So when she got home with her parents, they questioned her. She had no choice but to tell them directly that she had been lying for years and that, obviously, she hadn't graduated from the university they wanted. She even confessed that she had been seeing Daniel all those days she claimed to be at her friend's house, which made her parents furious. The only thing she didn't tell them was that she hadn't passed her last subject in high school, so she hadn't graduated, and that she also hadn't attended the first university she was supposed to go to. So her parents thought that all she had to do was simply enroll at the University of Toronto to start a degree, since they truly believed their daughter had graduated from high school and had also attended the first university. In other words, that she had spent 2 years getting an education. They had no idea it was all a lie. The truth is, they were very angry and almost kicked her out of the house. The thing is, they were worried about what might happen to her, so they let her stay at home. Grounded, not allowed to see anyone. But they let her stay in their home. Now, I repeat, she was an adult woman, 24 years old, about to turn 25. Let's just say they couldn't really punish her. She was an adult after all. But still, this family was just like that. They forced her to quit her job and just stick to giving piano lessons. She could only teach piano lessons, she couldn't have her phone, and they took away her laptop. Over time, they also realized that their daughter hadn't finished high school, so they made her go back and finish it. They finally had her take the exam for that one subject she still owed, so she could at least start working on her future again. Even so, her mother would sometimes let her have her phone back so she could send messages and connect for a bit. On the other hand, her boyfriend Daniel was getting fed up with what her parents were doing. He didn't want to see his girlfriend like they were teenagers, and he didn't want to have a curfew either. So in 2009, he decided to end the relationship, and over time he met another woman named Christine. But Jennifer couldn't tolerate any of this. So in 2010, at the beginning of the year, she made up this whole story where someone had knocked on her door, she opened it, and 3 people came into the house to abuse her and hurt her. All of this was to tell Daniel that these people had actually been sent by Christine. She never got tired of making up stories. She also told him that she had received a bullet in the mail, which was supposedly a death threat. But anyway, beyond all of this, technically they kept calling each other. Daniel kept in touch with her, responding to the messages and calls she sent him. The biggest problem in this case, at least for them, came on November 12th, 2010, 3 days after the attack. Hanpan woke up from the coma. He could barely speak, his face was still destroyed, he had a badly broken facial bone, his face was completely swollen, and obviously he had fractures that wouldn't heal for a very long time. The thing is, Han could speak just enough to be able to say what he had seen. He said that he had seen 2 dark-skinned men and 1 white man at his house, all of them wearing long, high-neck shirts, which was believed to be so they could hide tattoos. He also revealed that Jennifer was talking to these men, especially to one of them as if they were friends, and that not only was she not tied up, but she was also walking freely around the house as if nothing was happening. Because of this, Jennifer started to become a suspect in the case. Let's just say that, besides that, the detectives began to notice some pretty strange behavior from her. Not only did she not seem worried about her parents, but she was actually more concerned about how the media portrayed her, about how she looked to the public. On top of that, they had also gone with her to the funeral, and she complained for several days that she had to plan it all by herself and wondered how she was supposed to do that. Also, she didn't show anything. She didn't show any feelings at all. She would rub her eyes without any tears and look at the detectives as if to say, "Look at me, I'm crying," more or less. Because of all this, they called her in to testify again. With this third time they called her in, they managed to find a few inconsistencies. There's a particular analysis program where you feed it several stories, and it checks for differences in how the person tells them, what words they use, and how they structure their sentences. Also, thanks to fingerprint analysis, they were able to see who had touched the door latch. In other words, the person who opened the door to let those men into the house. So now I'm going to tell you what Jennifer actually did on the day of the attack. Jennifer called Andrew Montemayor, a young man she had met back in school when they were kids. This guy had once bragged about robbing a couple of people with a knife, so Jennifer told him about her personal life and how bad things were for her at home. By 2010, she was already thinking about how much better her life would be without her father. And it was at that moment that Andrew introduced her to another man named Ricardo Duncan. Altogether, at that time, they made a plan to kill Jennifer's father. She would pay Duncan $1,500, which she had earned from giving piano lessons. And with that, he was supposed to kill her father. Only her father. She gave him the money and told him she would call to set a date. The thing is, Jennifer started calling him, and he wouldn't answer the calls. He completely ignored her, cut her off from his contacts, and kept the money. He even told her directly at one point that he wouldn't do it. So, desperate, Jennifer got in touch with Daniel Wong, her boyfriend, well, ex-boyfriend. And her idea was that if she killed her parents, she could just inherit the estate and end up with $500,000. That way, she could build a house and be with the love of her life, Daniel. I should remind you that Daniel was a dealer, so he knew plenty of people who would do anything for a bit of money. So Daniel introduced Jennifer to a man named Lenford Crawford. Along with this, he gave Jennifer a new cell phone just for this kind of thing, only to be used for contacting people about the plan they were making. Crawford then found 2 other friends to help carry out the whole plan, and together, they were ready to kill Han. Jennifer told them that the reward for each of her parents would be $5,000, so a total of $10,000. And that they would get $2,000 up front at the time of the act, which Jennifer actually gave them. The detectives were able to get all this information thanks to what Jennifer eventually confessed. Let's just say she didn't confess directly the first time, but she did end up breaking down and telling part of what happened. At first, she said she was depressed and had therefore hired people to kill her at home because she didn't have the courage to do it herself. And that in the process, they got confused and went after her parents instead. That it was all just a mistake. Along with some text messages, phone calls, and a bit of investigation by the detectives in Jennifer's family, they were able to figure out who the 3 men involved in the murder were. So on March 19th, 2014, the trial took place. It took almost a year to finish, with tons of witnesses, testimonies, and 7 different days of Jennifer on the stand giving her account of what happened. For a long time, she insisted that all of this had simply been an accident. Later, she changed her story and said that she had tried to call off the attack, but by then she couldn't, and in fact, she would have had to pay a penalty if she wanted to cancel it. Let's just say that none of her excuses held up for very long, since there were tons of messages from her planning the murder with these people. So there was clear intent for the act to happen. She wanted the men to come. She had removed the lock from the door. So there was absolutely nothing she could use to justify herself. Therefore, on December 13th of the same year, the verdict was finally reached. Each of them received a life sentence with the possibility of applying for parole after 25 years in prison. Let's just say Jennifer's family doesn't want to see her, and her father was scarred for life because of this. He couldn't eat, sleep, he was depressed, and he couldn't work because of the injuries he had on his body. So his whole life was ruined because of what his daughter did to him. She didn't manage to kill him, she killed her mother, which I actually think was a mistake. And honestly, there's just no excuse for what she did, regardless of how her parents treated her. She was already an adult and could have left on her own. So I also have to add that Daniel died in 2018, a year ago, in his cell. Nothing more to say. This is where the story ends. Please let me know what you think down in the comments, although I guess there isn't much to say except why she thought of doing that instead of just leaving home. Anyway, here on the side are my Patreons. Thank you all for supporting me. Thanks to everyone who supports me on Patreon. If you want to know more about it, there's a link down in the description for you to check it out. Thank you to everyone who watches me on YouTube. I really appreciate it. Here you have a new video, and here you have a recommended video. You can subscribe by clicking on my face. And I'll see you in another video. Goodbye.